This appears to be authentic psychedelic witchcraft.
They're watching!
Hello, my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance. It's Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, and this is Matteuccia de Francesco, a medieval psychedelic witch. In 1428, in Todi, Italy, Matteuccia de Francesco was executed for witchcraft. Ancient medieval and early modern Europe was rife with conjurers, magicians, witches, and medicine workers of all kinds. While not every practitioner of the occult arts utilized psychoactive plants and mushrooms, we have strong evidence that some of them did. Matteuccia's record gives us excellent insight into what the so-called Witch of Todi got into. But first, if you're into this kind of content, please give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the Psychedelic Historian YouTube channel, and hit that little bell icon so that you're notified every time I post a new video. Also, it'd be great to link up on Instagram. Find me at Psychedelic Historian. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Around the early 1400s, when Matteuccia lived, female magicians were not unheard of, especially among the poor and lower classes. Since they couldn't afford to see the educated male doctors in the universities, many of them turned to these kinds of local healers. There was no universal tradition of witchcraft in those days. Each practitioner worked very differently with whatever client came to see them. Beyond that, different local healers also had different areas of specialty. Matteuccia de Francesco specialized in love magic, meaning she would make love potions and charms, break up weddings, and perform abortions. While some people today believe that these people practiced in secret, the historical record shows us a very different picture. While ceremonial magicians certainly practiced covertly, local magicians practiced openly and were largely tolerated by their communities. Matteuccia had been operating for years without any interference from both the local or church authorities. She wasn't seen as a witch by her neighbors, but rather as a vetulus expertissimas, meaning a woman who was highly skilled in herbs and potions and magic. As such, Matteuccia was familiar with several kinds of magic, those being sympathetic, hexing, and what we today might call entheogenic. Let's explore what each of those styles looked like, beginning with sympathetic magic. Once when a young man complained to Matteuccia that a woman who he had interest in was set to wed another man, Matteuccia told him to burn a candle at a crossroads during the time of the wedding. He was further to recite these words to the melting wax: "As this candle bends in this heat, so may bridegroom and bride never be united in love." Merriam-Webster has a definition for sympathetic magic which is as good as any other you'll find. Magic based on the assumption that a person or thing can be supernaturally affected through its name or an object representing it. In this case, the candle represented the pending matrimony, fused together by the magical words the young man was supposed to speak. This particular spell is purely magical, totally free of any kind of medicine or potion or otherwise. It's also free of any references to Satanism, which, as we'll see in a moment, certainly became tied into a stereotype about witches. The witch stereotype is a list of maleficent deeds that theologians believed witches actually practiced. The stereotype includes using magic to harm people or animals, cannibalism, worshipping the devil, and congregating with demons. Now, no one was ever really doing any of those things, just to be clear. Those are just theologically derived fantasies. However, the witch stereotype does help historians tease out which part of a person's confession was authentic and which parts of it were ideas inserted into the confession by the inquisitors. When the confession is on script, meaning that it perfectly relays the ideas of the witch stereotype, historians tend to see those words and confessions as not being authentic. When the confession is off script, meaning that there aren't really any elements of the witch stereotype, Historians tend to say that that's more accurate or reliable to what the person who was confessing actually practiced. Much like the candle and crossroads ritual I mentioned a moment ago, right? There was no Satanism or congregating with demons or harming children or anything like that. So historians tend to think that that was something that Matteuccia really did instruct this young man to do. And sometimes the two areas, meaning the authentic magic of local healers and the theologically derived witch stereotype, can be found placed on top of each other in the same trial record. And in fact, such a thing happens in the record of Matteuccia de Francesco. Let's briefly tease that all out. In one instance, a woman named Caterina came to see Matteuccia because she needed an abortion. She had been impregnated by the local priest in her hometown, Piave. In the trial record, we get a recipe. Caterina was to burn a female mule hoof to ash, mix it with wine, and drink it. This is probably an authentic potion because it doesn't have any of the elements of the witch stereotype. It was intended to be both medicinal and magical. It was medicinal in the sense that it was an abortion drug. And it was magical because there doesn't seem to be any medical or scientific reason that the hoof had to come from specifically a female mule. Why not a male mule? Or a cow? Or a non-binary horse? Now, here's where the witch stereotype comes into the record. For Caterina was also supposed to say, "I take you in the name of the sin and of the great demon, that it might never stick." It's certainly possible that Matteuccia instructed Caterina to recite some kind of magical words as she was drinking the potion. But it's highly unlikely that she mentioned anything resembling a great demon. Folk magic of this kind had nothing to do with Satanism. Until the early 1400s, when some theologians decided it did. Right around the time Matteuccia was practicing her craft. Matteuccia also had knowledge of powerful herbs. Although, with modern botany only developing a century after Matteuccia was executed, we're kind of fuzzy on what kind of plants she actually used. They do seem to have been effective, though. For those who called on Matteuccia for a love potion, she would give them an unspecified herb enchanted by her incantations and feed it to the person her customer hoped to attract. They were then to wash their hands and feet and then give that wash water to their mark to drink. The incantations and the washing of the hands and feet probably served as a way of reinforcing the magic. But it was the herb that gave the spell efficacy, as it guaranteed that the person who ate it or drank it would certainly feel something physically. As one scholar of magic and witchcraft commented, "A magician may supplement his toxins with the mumbo-jumbo of rituals and spells, but it is the poisons themselves that have effect." While we will never know what kind of herb Matteuccia actually used for this potion, we do know that the highly psychoactive plant mandrake was one of the more popular, I should say actually the most popular plant found in these kinds of potions. But, of course, we can't say for certain. On another occasion, Matteuccia instructed a woman named Giovanna de San Martino to sweeten a certain reed with sugar. She was then to wash her hands and feet with wine and give the meal to her husband to eat. The reed might have been the giant cane known as Arundo donax, which is native to Italy. Recent studies have shown that that reed contains two tryptamines, bufatonin and dimethyltryptamine. Interestingly, centuries earlier, the famed physician Dioscorus wrote about this kind of practice in his Liber Venenis, or the Book of Poisons. Poisoners remove the bitterness of poisons by adding something sweet. They also mix poisons with drugs and put them in drinks and meals. Perhaps the sugar was added to the reed to make the meal more palatable? We simply do not know. Welcome to the frustrating world of being a psychedelic historian. Matteuccia also used plants for purely mercenary reasons. One woman who lamented her husband's abuse asked Matteuccia for a way to make restitution for the numerous and great indignities he visited upon her daily. Matteuccia gave the woman the herb horsetail, told her to cook it with an egg, and feed it to her husband. We can infer that this woman took great pleasure in watching her husband walk around, deranged to the point of insanity for 3 days after he ate the meal. It is written that Matteuccia sold this recipe to a great and uncountable number of women. Now, horsetail is a powerful diuretic and doesn't cause insanity so far as we know. Now I'm totally speculating here, but it is possible that Matteuccia gave her client a stupefying drug, and not actually horsetail, that was misidentified in the records. Bear in mind, this all took place 100 years before anything like what we would call modern botany even existed. The victim's reaction to the drug being deranged to the point of insanity certainly alludes more to a psychoactive than a diuretic. Although, his reaction could have also been culturally scripted as well. What I mean by culturally scripted is this. It totally is possible that the husband knew that he had been hexed and decided to play out the scenario in some kind of somatic way. That was actually more common than we might think. In one extreme case, a wise woman placed 3 eggs on the lap of a mother who had just delivered a child a few days earlier. The delivery did not go well, and now the woman was sick. Now this took place in an area of Germany, and according to local lore at the time, witches used eggs to transmit their spells. The cultural construct was so strong that the sickly woman ended up actually getting even more sick and dying a few days after the wise woman placed the eggs on her lap. So while it's totally possible that the husband's reaction was culturally scripted due to him believing he had been hexed and simply playing out the scenario, we are given a further clue by the incantation Matteuccia told her clients to say as their targets ate this meal. I give you to drink in the name of the specter and of the enchanted spirits, and may be unable to sleep or rest until you do what I would command you. Perhaps the plant was some kind of stimulant that drove the person crazy from just wakefulness? And notice how no elements of the witch stereotype appear in the incantation. But now, it's about to get messy. We see the biggest insertion of the witch stereotype into Matteuccia's record when we get to the part that discusses her flying ointment, or witch's ointment, as it is sometimes called. The witch's ointment was a special kind of mixture that allowed a person to travel in spirit, or transvect, to use the Latin word. We today might call this astral projection or having an out-of-body experience. And the first mention we have of this kind of ointment anywhere in history appears in the trial record of Matteuccia de Francesco. Supposedly, she rubbed the ointment over her body, turned into a mouse, and then called upon a demon to transport her to the night gatherings in Benevento around a walnut tree. Benevento is another area in central Italy. At the walnut tree, Matteuccia and the others would revere the enemy of the human race, meaning Satan. Afterward, the witches would suck the blood out of babies to use in their magic. Except for 3 aspects, meaning calling on a demon, revering Satan, and murdering children for magic, none of the other attributes, being animal transformation and transvection, appear anywhere in the witch stereotype. This was a regular folk belief with a theological veneer laid on top of it. And who exactly was the enemy of the human race anyway? Most astounding, Benevento had a rich tradition of worshipping the Egyptian goddess Isis, as we see from this pillar dedicated to her found in Piazza Papignano. It just might be that in this case, Isis was replaced with Satan in the trial record. As we saw, Matteuccia's record contains both folk beliefs, being animal transformation and transvection, and theological stereotypes about witches, like demonism and child murder. We can quite literally parse out Matteuccia's genuine folk beliefs from the theologically contrived ideas of the theologians. For example, the first part of this section of the dossier holds that Matteuccia rubbed the ointment over her body while she sung these words. Ointment, ointment, bring me to the night doings at Benevento, over water, over wind, over all bad weather. This does not belong to any theologically contrived fantasy. It appears only in this one testimony out of thousands, meaning it was not part of any witch stereotype script. Otherwise, we would have seen it all over the place. This appears to be authentic psychedelic witchcraft. And let us note that Matteuccia places the transvection powers squarely on the ointment, right? In her incantation, she says, ointment, ointment, bring me to the night doings at Benevento. However, the record does not stop there, for apparently, Matteuccia continued chanting, O Lucibel, demon of hell, after you were released, you changed your name and have the name of Great Lucifer. Come to me or send me one of your servants. Here is the witch stereotype, forced into her mouth by zealous bastards under torturous conditions. According to the record, the ointment was made of owl and vulture blood, and that's probably true, the blood of infants, which probably wasn't true, and other ingredients, although those other ingredients are not recorded anywhere in the dossier. I believe those other ingredients were possibly psychedelic in nature. It is also possible that the idea of a blood of infants was just sort of plastered over the idea of drugs in the same way the enemy of the human race was plastered over the goddess Isis. And there were at least a couple of reasons for the authorities to ignore or leave out of the record any mention of psychoactives. First, like physician Johann Wehr, the authorities might have simply feared that releasing this information would encourage other people to try this kind of ointment themselves. For Wehr wrote that he knew of physicians who knew all kinds of these really psychoactive concoctions, but didn't write about them, lest I seem to have furnished someone with the opportunity to abuse them. It's also possible that the authorities just stood in the line of other writers like Jean Vincent and Reginald Scott, who accepted that the ointments were psychoactive, but downplayed their psychoactivity in favor of the devil's powers. Vincent wrote of these ointments in this way: wise women skilled with plants mix pharmaca into love potions and ointments which cause bizarre psychological reactions, transformations, but usually end up killing the user. These women claim to be transported far away at night to demonic sabbats by using the aforementioned pharmaca. The correct deduction, however, is that none of these magical feats should be attributed to the natural powers found in the pharmaca, but instead to a shrewd demon, who is the primary operative cause, whereas the pharmaca is only the secondary cause. It sounds to me like Vincent was fully aware that these ointments were psychoactive, but suppressed that fact to make room for the influence of the devil. Reginald Scott had a similar idea, writing that witches or magicians have power by words, herbs, or imprecations to thrust into the mind or conscience of man by virtue of their charms, herbs, stones, or familiars. I deny. As for what really caused the magic, if not the herbs, well, Scott was resolute, that the devil travelleth to seduce man and to lead him from God. So it simply wasn't unheard of for authorities to put the psychoactive plants in the back seat to make room for the devil to be sitting in the driver's seat. As Jean Vincent and Reginald Scott, and perhaps Matteuccia's inquisitors, did as well. And for that, Matteuccia was executed. Another wise woman skilled with herbs who was a benefit to her community sacrificed on the altar of Christian dogma. Well, my friends, that's all I have for you this time, and I'd love to thank you for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and a share, subscribe to the channel, and find me on Instagram. And until we meet again, I'm Tom Hatzis, your psychedelic historian, reminding you that you free your mind by using your brain. Peace.